Greetings, everyone. Well, patrons first, and then everyone afterwards. I'm back in my kitchen, as you can see. So, this is the weekend right after my finals. I just got done, recuperating, putting my brain back together from the stress of the finals week. I really put myself at the meat grinder with that one. But yeah, so I have an interesting opportunity to do some writing over the next couple of weeks because it's Christmas break, basically, for everybody. And I really want to finish up the playtest for Lone Wolf Fist, so you guys have it right around Christmas. So we should have the Lone Wolf Fist playtest, and as soon as we get layout and a few other things done, the very last few pages of layout, and then all the page XX stuff, index, and all that great stuff for Changeling, All of Heaven, Act 1, etc., that should be done too. So the next very little bit, as soon as my layout guy gets back to me on that, and as soon as I complete the writing on Lone Wolf Fist, lots of fun products for everybody to enjoy. So I'm very excited about that. I wanted to come on, give patrons an update. I know, view counts I get from these things, I upload them to YouTube, and basically nobody watches them. There's 4 or 5 people, I think, which might be just you patrons. Maybe they're the ones that care. I don't know. But I wanted to get on, and I wanted to talk about some of the Kung Fu styles again, and just kind of ramble a little bit about that, because I'm excited. I get to work on this stuff pretty much uninterrupted for the next week. And that's a really good place I haven't been in for a while. And I've had all these ideas seething in my head that I've had to keep putting off the actual writing of, and so they're all in notebook form. I've got to tear them off and put them in my little design diary. As you can see, there's lots of stuff in there. Or they're in playtest form, which has all the playtest stuff that I printed out. Or they're in notebook form. You can see my notebooks here. I have 3 of them that are basically stuffed with ideas that I have. Some of them I develop, most of them I don't. There's a lot of stuff in there that's just bad. But you need to do the bad stuff. You need to write down all the bad stuff so you can mine out the little good nuggets that are in it. Right now, I just finished writing the Firebindy style Atomic Dragon Fist, and I finished writing Unearthly Gift, which is the Psychic style. So I had very clear visions for how those were going to work, and I managed to kind of bring them forward really nicely. I'm going to, tonight, try to type them all up, although I'm a little busy. I've got some Christmas shopping to do. But I'm going to, tonight, try to type them all up in between all those things. And then tomorrow, I want to do the 5-star Spirits, Closing the Gateways, Kung Fu. And that one's going to be uniquely challenging, because that is the one that is most directly based on the Hokuto-no-ken, poke you a bunch and then your head explodes stuff from Fist of the North Star. And, alright, so that's one of those things that doesn't translate super well into a game directly, because it's almost literally an I win button, because you even poke them and then they die. So, in a game that's about combat, here, my head's lit kind of weird and I look shiny. Yeah, it's a little better. I'm going to go with better. In a game that's about combat, being able to bypass all the stuff between I try to hurt them and they die, that's like saying I don't want to play this game anymore. I just want to win the game. So it'd be like if in Monopoly, instead of rolling the dice, you could just declare where you were going to and declare where your opponents were going to. There's no game left in Monopoly if you get to do that. And it's the same thing with designing a Kung Fu style that skips right to the head exploding. Clearly the head exploding should be a dramatic finale. It shouldn't be the opening salvo, but in Fist of the North Star, it's the opening salvo. Because it's supposed to catch your attention. It's a more passive media, so the audience immersion in it, the audience interest isn't really kept very well unless something cool happens really quickly. And in Fist of the North Star, it opens really strongly with a guy poking a dude a bunch and then his head explodes. So you immediately kind of are on board for what this anime is going to be about. And that's where You're Already Dead comes from. That's where all the really iconic Fist of the North Star stuff comes from. And that's something I want to be in a game. But I'm struggling with it, because that should not be in a game in that exact form. Now, thankfully, I've got a few places I can retreat to. Right now, what I'm thinking is that what you've got there is something that builds aggravation to some kind of imbalance. I don't know if it's going to be physical or spiritual or what. which is how I've currently got it in the iBleed, or I don't think it's actually in the iBleed, but it's in the blog somewhere, where you do an attack and it builds imbalance, or it builds aggravation and imbalance. And a really small Pudsmacky guy with only one health point, or one health box and one effort pool, you can attack him with that, and it's overwhelmingly powerful to him. Even at his full defense, you build so much aggravation that his head would explode. So what that says to me pretty clearly is that you can do that in a way that's immediately lethal to a weaker opponent, and then a stronger opponent, it's a little more challenging. It doesn't kill them quite as quickly. And that's even in Fist of the North Star. Like, at one point, he's fighting Jaggy, and he does the exact same, your head's going to explode now attack to him, but Jaggy is able to, like, use his thumb to poke holes in his body, which I guess redirects his chi meridians or something, and so he doesn't die immediately. He's just in horrible agony for the rest of his life. Ugh, sorry, I've got a stomach virus. I'm not feeling super good right now. I'm trying to be chipper for the camera, but I'm actually really sick. Anyway, so there's some precedence even within the original source material for that, for not being immediately killed by a little fist, the pokey explodey attack, which I'm certain has an actual cool sounding name, but I'm going to call it the pokey exploding attack because that's a more robust description, I think, than kind of a fanciful name. I'm trying to pull off a turtleneck today. I even shaved my neck hair, as you can see, and gave myself a crappy haircut. I still have a part. Do I still have a part? Jesus. Sorry, I've not been in front of a mirror today. I've been writing and doing other stuff. Anywho, so the other problem I've been having with the Fist of the North Star fighting style is that that's basically all it does. Like, it kind of generically makes you a superhuman, which this system already sort of does. Like, the effort pool and the skills and the skill boost from techniques, that makes every character superhuman. Like, you can lift up battleships and shit with every single character, granted a high enough level of technique and enough effort dice and all that. So, like, that's not unique to Hokuto-no-ken as far as, like, how it manifests in the game. I've already done that, so I can't then go back and make special techniques that make you do that better. I could do it cheaper, or I could do it so that you are more powerful at it, but neither of those feel like they're really hitting at that core thing that the style does. So what I'm doing right now, actually, is I'm going and rewatching episodes, and I'm going through whatever manga I can get my hands on. There's not a lot of online manga that I can grab for it. And just any source I can find, trying to figure out, like, what kind of powers does this martial style give its practitioners, aside from the head exploding thing? Because I've seen a few different ones. Like, he can paralyze someone with it, and he can make them do stuff with it. Like, you can kind of, like, program them to do stuff with those little pokey powers. But past the poking, like, what else does it do? It makes you super strong and fast, like all martial arts in my game does. What else? And so I've been trying to think, like, creatively, like, what kind of powers does it give you to fill out the 10 I've got to give it? And then on top of that, the new design paradigm with all of the martial arts is very much like, what is the strategic approach of this martial art to fighting? Is it more powerful earlier? Is it more powerful later? Does it rely on status effects? Does it rely on stealth? Is it more defensive, more offensive? Is it balanced? Like, there's a lot of thought put into how is this going to manifest in the different stages of a fight. And fights do have stages. Like, the earlier stages are very cleanly different from the mid stages and the later stages, because, like, there's an adjustment period as you're fighting where you're filling up your focus slots and you're changing the environment with shaping, and you're moving to position yourself better, and you're opening up chakras and getting larger amounts of prana, and you're charging attacks. So, like, there's stuff you can't do in the earlier rounds, and it makes it makes the paradigm for fights evolve as they go on longer and longer. And so different styles and different techniques are useful at different periods during a fight. And that's like really the strategic core of the game right there, is that whole, like, what stage of the fight are you at? And so again with this, I'm looking at it like, okay, this is protagonist foo in a lot of ways. It's good late, it's good early, it's good at any stage, and he's never really at a disadvantage versus anyone. What happens later on is that he gets in situations where he's fighting people that are as powerful as him, and it's basically rock'em sock'em robots. Like, there's not a lot of cleverness that happens. Like, either someone is fighting on an uphill battle against Kenshiro, or they're on the same level, or maybe like a little bit over or under, and they're just... And so there's not a lot of cleverness there. It's just this real, like, wrestly kind of clash of wills thing. It's basically an arm wrestling match. So... That can and should happen in the game. Sometimes you should have moments where you're really just clashed and locking with someone, and it's almost just like fate that one of you barely tips the scale. That should happen. I think that's something that, if maybe a little rarer than it happens in the anime, but I still think that's something that should possibly happen. You know, you have an attack for every one of their defenses, and they defend exactly, and so you guys just kind of, deadlock. That's neat. But what should break that isn't the plot coming forward and saying, but you have the heart of a warrior, the heart of the cards, your true destiny. Fuck that. It should be something clever on the part of the player. I have this cool strategic idea that I have that I'm going to try out. So, the deadlocks need to get broken by something clever happening. And... I don't know. It's hard to design... a kung fu out of protagonist fu, because it's so wed to the kind of hero's journey plot that, like, the discrete powers that allow you to be clever aren't as prevalent. That wasn't such a big deal whenever I was basing stuff off Avatar: The Last Airbender, because in that one, like, even though Aang is, like, the main character, he still struggles a lot, and his powers are all about, how do I use this incredible power creatively to beat my foes? Or how do I use the amount of power that I have to beat them creatively? Like, every fight with Aang he's doing something cunning and clever. So, it's not so much protagonist fu. Like, Kenshiro's is very much protagonist fu. It's very much like, I have the true heart of the cards, or fucking whatever. And so, I am just kind of better than everyone else. Aang never felt like he was like really laying the smackdown on someone until he went nuts and went into Avatar state. Then it was more like a living natural disaster came and just blew away your whole fleet at the Northern Water Temple or whatever. So that was, and again, that's a much more interesting manifestation than I will punch even harder. There's some redeeming stuff about punching harder, but I don't know. Like, a lot of times, I was able to kind of like go back to the Street Fighter games and animes and what have you with some of the styles, because again, there is a clear protagonist in Ryu in those, but he struggles a lot, and it's not so much that he has, like, protagonist fu. He has, like, this unbending will to not die, which is just a little bit distinct from the way Kenshiro does it. But it's left me sort of high and dry for, like, okay, what's the strategic approach of the 5-star spirits? Like, what made them so dangerous that they had to get wiped out by one of the big, clear bad guys of the setting? What's so great about their kung fu? And my go-to place for it is to kind of dovetail it with All Above Heaven, because I'm designing that too. And one of the things you can do in All Above Heaven that I'm still sort of just putting my toes out on, just a little dip in the pool of this one, is you can transcend your mortal state entirely and become something more than human, like deific almost. They're just straight up, just deific. And that goes to really huge places, which I'm very carefully laying the design work for this stuff. And you can definitely see it in Lone Wolf Fist even. But like, I'm very slowly anchoring these little pylons about how you can model effectively every atom of this world within terms of the game. And I'm doing that so whenever, like, what's his name? Gonzin? Shozen? Whatever his name is. Whenever the Ashura's Wrath shit happens, and the guy you're fighting vanishes, and then a moon-sized version of him comes in and decides to smash you with its god finger, there's a way to model that's satisfying to the players, and you feel like that's actually happening, and it doesn't suddenly become a different game entirely. Like, I always want your strategic approach as a player to be pretty uniform, or to evolve in steps from that uniformity that allow you to have a sense of continuity with it. Like, a lot of games have this dividing line between the game you started playing and this other kind of like cosmic god game that is sort of tangentially related to it. One of the ones that struck me was Changeling, the Lost, I want to say. I've got a whole bunch of green in my books over there, which is the Changeling collection I have, Really good stuff. There's a few things in the system that are clearly not fully like written correctly. They need to go through their draft or two. Like the Oneromancy is really it's not connected very well to other stuff, and it's not clear how your dice are supposed to do something or what you can accomplish with it. But Changeling Lost overall, like running it and doing stuff with it is really solid. It's a fun game that has a good core to it, and it lends itself to some pretty easy to design for principles. So like if you want to run a game, you obviously have these like chunks that you can use to pace it really nicely. It does suffer from some of the World of Darkness stuff where there's this big sort of society built up around this tiny network of survivors from alien monster gods, and that feels a little like, you have a society, really? I thought the whole point was getting your life back, not joining a LARP group. But whatever. It suffers from that a bit, but you can make it work. And one of the things in Changeling, the last parts of Changeling the Lost Line, was they gave you this ability to play as the True Fae, who until then had been these almost unapproachably powerful monsters that you just don't have any real ability to fight. And that's part of the fun of Changeling, is that you've got to find a way to deal with them, because those guys are hunting your ass, and they will annihilate you or drag you back into eternal slavery in Fairyland unless you find a way to outwit them. And so a lot of the game, like basically the entire game, is centered around that conceit, where it's like, okay, so I've lost everything about myself, I've been turned into this weird, freaky fairy monster, I was replaced by an evil magic clone of myself, or maybe I'm going insane, and I am going insane, and I have to rely on the thing that made me go insane, or else the thing that is in charge that made me go insane will come and drag me back to that thing forever, and I'll be a slave to it for all eternity. And like, so there's all this cool stuff going on in Changeling, but part of the central thing that makes it fun to play is how powerful the bad guys are. You really just can't fight them directly. There is a faction that's all about bringing the war to them, but I always felt like that was more bravado and more like getting a sense of empowerment and agency than it was about actually going and fighting these things, because they're just ridiculously powerful. Like, one of them's literally a dragon. 1 for 1 a dragon. So, good luck, asshole. I mean, like, because whenever you're a D&D character, you go from being, like, a hero, like, sort of, like, Hobbit-style hero, like, I've got a sword and I fight goblins, to someone a little closer to Beowulf. Beowulf could reasonably kill a dragon, you know? I mean, it sucked, but he did do it, although he died. Or, I mean, St. George, it's your favorite dragon slayer. You sort of become a mythical, like, legend hero after a while, and so, like, the laws of reality only apply to you sort of tangentially after a little while in D&D. And it's got this really nice power curve for you. But, like, in Changeling, you stay within this 1 to 5 range on all of your stats and skills, so you never really crack that ceiling. But the bad guys do, because they're dragons and shit. So you're always very wed to the mortality of the character and to, like, the reality of them in a really good way that isn't deprotagonizing, but it does keep protagonists vulnerable. So whenever a literal, true-to-fact dragon shows up, it's a big deal. You know, you have to think about, like, how the hell are we going to kill this thing? I mean, like, my players would probably find a way to make military-grade hardware or steal it or otherwise acquire it and then just fill it with cold iron bullets, because they're awesome like that. And, like, it's very World of Darkness to use a World War II-era anti-aircraft turret filled with magic bullets against a dream dragon in, like, downtown St. Louis. So, like, that's okay. And, like, if that's the sort of thing I'd be on board with for a game, that sounds amazing. You know, that's a very cool solution to that, and what a great finale to a Changeling game. But the point I was trying to drive at was that at one point in one of the last books, or maybe the last book, it lets you play as one of the True Fae, but it doesn't actually, because it doesn't connect back to the game at all. What happens is it's a storytelling device to make the concepts of True Fae and kind of give you this like legend scheme for all of them that explains some stuff about them. So it commits a couple of grievous sins. The biggest one game-wise, is that it is 100% a storytelling game. You tell a story, they tell a story, you tell a story, they tell a story, and that's it. That's how you play these beings. And so because there's no connection to consequences or reality or the way the game mechanics work at all, you still have no scale for how powerful they are. You still can't connect that back to game mechanics at all. And all of the powers they have and the names they get and all the things they do aren't in any way connected concretely to modeling or creating or playing or anything the bad guys. So you're still left with this kind of sense of, okay, after reading that whole system. And it's a really big wall between here's all the stuff you can do and here's all the stuff we can model, and then here is the wall, and then here's this other game you can play, I guess, if you want to, that doesn't have anything to do with this game, but it does. I don't like that. I don't like whenever we abandon game mechanics and start playing a different game. That always bothers me. So I'm trying to make certain I don't have a similar wall. I want to make certain that when you go from being a hero, like a mortal hero with magic powers, to a god, to like a planet-sized titan moon monster, like every one of those things has a solid connection and interacts. So you could have heroes versus moon monster, or gods versus heroes, or gods versus moon monsters, gods versus gods, moon monsters versus moon monsters, and all of that should be fun. And it should be different, and it should be something you can approach tactically and creatively in the same way that you approach playing any game, any role-playing game. So, point being, that's a goal that I have. It's a lofty goal. That's eaten a lot of game designers. A lot of people that have made role-playing games thinking they're going to do that. And I think the closest anyone ever got was Neil Raymond Prince, I think is his name. I think he was the editor on Legends of the Woolen too, but he's the guy that wrote the mechanics for the Infernal Exalted in 2nd edition. That book is kind of notorious because the first half of it is this just awful prose that is really confused about if you're playing a good guy or an irredeemable monster, and it's really not clear what it's trying to get at. Like at some points it's like, oh, the primordials were the real good guys, and then at other points it's like, no, they want to eat the faces off of babies, and then at some points it's like, you want to eat the faces off of babies because your bosses are wanting to make you do that, and that makes you a good guy, and you're just like, what? Like, I'm all for abandoning like traditional morality in a game like Exalted, but what the fuck, man? There's a point when even I am confused about like what I'm supposed to be feeling or thinking about this stuff. If the point is that it is unapproachably alien, that these are beings that are able to think about eating the faces off of babies or whatever other horrible thing in terms of that being some sort of righteous action, then okay, that's pretty alien. But I don't know. The book has trouble carrying it off, and it comes off pretty bad in places. So the first half of that book will kill you. Here's the thing, though. I only read the first half of that book once, because I skipped right to the charm section so I could play the cool hellbad guys. Because that's why I bought the book, because I play games. I don't care about the stupid story. And so it never really bothered me. I read it once and I was like, whatever. Seriously, it didn't have the effect on me. I read about it online later, and people were like sputtering milk out their nose about how horrible that chapter was. And indeed, it inspired me to go back and read that chapter and be like, what the hell were they thinking? This is awful. Oh, please don't throw up on camera. Oh, God. I'm okay. I'll be alright. I ate a hot dog this morning. That was not a smart thing to do with a stomach virus. Never let it be said that I make good decisions, kids. Anyway. Oh, fuck. Anyway, point being, Neil wrote the charms in that one, as I recall. I might be screwing that up, but I'm pretty sure he wrote the charms. And those are really great. Those are really great because Exalted already made you a superhero, and these made you a superhero in a weird way, but not in the way that Sidereals were weird, where they had like these really hyper-specific corner case charms, and they were just like, and deal with it, that's all you get. So it was more like having a bag of kooky tricks than it was like being a superhero. This made you a superhero, but it also clearly literally was like polluting your soul with the magic of like broken gods. And it's really neat. And they actually carried that forward. I think the Ink Monkeys carried that forward into even more abilities to effectively become an actual primordial. And as I recall, Neil's point in writing them was that someday he hoped to do a here's how you turn into a primordial or a Yozi charms. And like, aside from the scaling issues in Exalted had real big issues with actually scaling things. Like, if those were removed, which is what I did with my game, you could do that. And that, I don't think that path was ever really explored with that level of skill before. Now, granted, there's still problems with the charm set. There's a lot of problems underlying the design of Exalted 2nd Edition that sort of killed it in the crib. Like all the stuff that really murdered Exalted, all the John Chung, like paranoia combat 710 filter stuff, all that's in the core book. The ideas behind Exalted 2nd Edition were poisoned right from the core book. So there's only so much you can do. There's only so much good you can wring out of anything from a game that is that deeply and fundamentally flawed. But every drop of that is in the Exalted 2nd Edition Infernals charm set. So, made for good gameplay. For what gameplay can be salvaged out of Exalted 2nd Edition, it made for compelling gameplay. And like I ran Infernals a lot after I got the Infernals book. I never even bothered with Abyssals again. Because I was like, these guys have so much more attitude than the Abyssals do. They are so much cooler. They've got this really like punk, acid, heavy metal, bronze, and nuclear fire thing to them. Very, very nifty. Very good aesthetic. Very well carried off with the mechanics. It's just an enriching and fun thing. And as close as I think that I've ever seen to actually making playable characters that were slowly turning into totally different entities, like gods in this case. It's really cool. Really cool stuff. And like, something I want to be able to... I don't want to say emulate. But like something that I want to use as inspiration for my stuff. And I think after all that spiel, the real capstone point that I was trying to make within a minute, and I think I took about 15 minutes to make, was that I think the capstone charm, or the capstone charm, it's a charm, it's a technique, but it's a charm. Alright, so the capstone power in the opening the gates thing, it's gonna have to hint at the all above heaven stuff. These have to be the one faction of hyper capable aesthetics that like were starting to poke the belly of heaven and made a little crack. So yeah, I'm gonna have to actually sit down and review how that's gonna happen in All Above Heaven, and then make sure I'm unifying it with this style. And then the ultimate technique is gonna give you a little taste about what All Above Heaven is gonna be able to do. So look forward to that. In the meantime, I've been on here about half an hour, so I'm gonna go pick up my kids. After I hit the bathroom, I think I may have to throw up a little bit. Anyway, peace out.